News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow.
Karen, we begin with new geopolitical tensions on the high seas. The U.S. has seized a sanctioned oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela. It is an escalation of tensions that have focused on deadly military strikes on suspected drug smuggling boats out of the oil-rich country. President Trump confirmed the move in comments from the White House.
We've just seized a tanker on the coast of Venezuela, large tanker, very large. Largest one ever seized, actually.
And following President Trump's remarks, Attorney General Pam Bondi posted a video on X of heavily armed forces dropping onto the ship's deck from a Black Hawk helicopter. Bloomberg's Steven Stapczynski reports the U.S. concluded the vessel was headed for Cuba.
This is a very large crude carrier. Trump was correct. It is big, 2 million barrels of oil, and it's abnormal to send carriers this large to Cuba. So where was its actual destination? It's still unclear. Was it actually going to China? But either way, the Trump administration did decide to do this, saying that because the ship was already sanctioned, we have the authority to board it and take it.
Bloomberg's Steven Stapczynski reports the Venezuelan government says the seizure shows U.S. aggression has always been about its natural resources. President Trump is suggesting the U.S. should keep the oil.
Now let's go to the latest on efforts to end the war in Ukraine. Nathan, a coalition of more than 30 countries will hold a virtual meeting on the latest peace proposal. Ukraine sent its revised plan to the U.S. overnight after President Trump held a call with the leaders of France, Germany, and the U.K.
We discussed Ukraine in pretty strong words, and we'll see what happens. I mean, we're waiting to hear answers.
President Trump says it's time for the war to get settled. Bloomberg's Oliver Crook reports 3 documents are under discussion. The first is a 20-point framework for peace with Russia.
European leaders are trying to urge Donald Trump to come to Europe potentially this weekend to have discussions. Trump said that that's, potentially on the table, but really he wants to have more security, that there's actual progress being made in the negotiations before agreeing to do that. Yesterday also, we had President Zelensky and a number of top Ukrainian officials meeting with Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, meeting with Scott Bessent, the U.S. Treasury Secretary, Jared Kushner, who seems to be involved in just about everything these days, to talk about the reconstruction of Ukraine. And that is the second document, is about reconstruction. And the third document is the third and probably the most contentious. This is all about detailing what are the security guarantees going forward for Ukraine.
And Bloomberg's Oliver Crook reports it remains unclear whether Russian President Vladimir Putin will agree to a deal. After talks last week in Moscow, the Kremlin said some proposals on the table were acceptable, but it rejected others.
Turning to the markets now, Karen, futures are lower following yesterday's Fed-fueled rally on Wall Street. The main culprit is disappointing earnings from Oracle. Those shares are down more than 11% now. Revenue and operating income fell short of analyst estimates, and the company raised its AI spending forecast. Oracle's fate is deeply tied to the artificial intelligence boom. Annabelle Drulers covers Oracle for Bloomberg.
Investors were already quite cautious, and you can see that drop there in the stock over the last few months. But we have seen about a drop of a third since the stock hit its all-time high back in September. And certainly seems like those fears haven't been allayed at all, because you're seeing Oracle there very much under pressure on those questions really about the exposure that Oracle has to OpenAI's business in particular.
Bloomberg's Annabelle Drulers says Oracle now expects capital expenditures to reach about $50 billion. $50 billion. That's about $15 billion more than its September forecast.
Nathan, the Oracle disappointment taking the shine off the market's best day on a Fed decision since March. The S&P 500 rose 0.7%. The Fed delivered a widely anticipated quarter-point interest rate cut, but policymakers are increasingly split on the path ahead. Rate setters voted 9-3 on that cut. Fed Chair Jay Powell says the central bank has a tough mandate.
It's a close call. We have to make decisions. And we always hope that the data will give us a clear read, but in this situation, you have competing. If you look through the SEP, you'll see that a very large number of participants agree that risks are to the upside for unemployment and to the upside for inflation. So what do? You've got one tool. You can't do two things at once.
The results from Jay Powell and the Fed mark the first time since 2019 that 3 officials voted against a policy decision, with dissents on both ends of the policy spectrum. And that's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Karen Moscow.
I'm Nathan Hager, and this is Bloomberg.